All right, hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 24, the first of 3 parts on classroom management, and specifically looking at establishing a positive learning environment in your particular classroom. So, why do we need to address classroom management as a teacher? Basically, this is what we're going to be addressing, what you need to think about, and about how to actually set up your classroom, sort of from physical to how do you set up rules to how do you set up first day. So that will be the scope of what we'll look at over the three lectures. Okay, so why do we need to address classroom management as a teacher? Let's talk about the specifics of this. So basically, classrooms are complex places. There are a lot of things going on. So these are some of the ways that classrooms are complex. Classrooms are multidimensional. Basically, they are settings for many activities, including academic and social. So basically, as a teacher, you have to monitor all the academic activities while keeping students on track. Work has to be assigned, individuals need to have individual needs met, differentiation has to happen, you have to keep the fighting grade 3 girls apart, right? So there are lots of things. You are just constantly working at several levels, all the way from just making sure that the kids are not rolling on the floor, all the way up to how are you dealing with those higher level blooms, questions, and challenges, okay? Activities happen simultaneously. Things are happening all at once. You rarely get to just deal with academics and then social things separate from, you're dealing with everything all at the same time. You will have groups working, you'll have you'll have kids out in the hallway. Actually, I just had one student teacher say to me, wow, the kids are actually physically everywhere. Like I have one in the library and I have 2 in the hallway, and then I have group works, and I have an individual, and I have a child in the in a separate room with an EA, and so things are happening simultaneously all the time. And so you have to be able to, again, manage all of these things at the same time. Third one, events happen quickly and at a rapid pace. So things can go awry really quickly. For example, I was teaching when I was a music teacher, and I was teaching grade 7 band. And, you know, it's kind of chaotic. We did band in a classroom, so they had to move all the desks, and then we had to set up all these folding stands, and then the kids had to get their instruments out. So it's fairly chaotic, but organized chaos. And I was talking with some kids, and then I looked up, and here was the principal had 2 of my boys by literally the scruff, like the back of their shirt, hauling them out of class. And I went, wow, what just happened? And they're like, well, they were fighting in the back. And I totally missed it. So things happen quickly, things change quickly, and it's a pretty rapid pace in the classroom. Events are often unpredictable, so there are some times when you're going to have some unanticipated events. So something like there's a fire drill that you didn't know about, a child can get sick in your class, a bee can fly through your class, and suddenly it's chaos. So all those sorts of fun things that happen, but unpredictable. There's very little privacy. So there is very little time for you to deal with things in private, and students basically can see you all the time. It's like you're in a fishbowl all the time, which is, again, great. But if you're not aware of that and you go into a classroom and like, wow, there's very little privacy time for you to deal with classroom management issues. Children remember. Now, here we go. Kids are very forgiving and will forget lots of things that you thought were a big deal. So I had a student teacher who actually forgot to give the report cards out on a Friday. She was supposed to give report cards out, and she totally forgot, and she fretted about it the entire weekend. And I said, you know what? Just hand them out on Monday. Just apologize and say, I am so sorry, I forgot to hand out the report cards, and hand them out on Monday. And No parents contacted her, and the partner teacher just laughed and said, just hand them out on Monday. So again, these are things that we think are big deals. They won't remember, but they will remember. They will remember if you were inconsistent or not fair. You must be consistent and you must be fair. That they understand differentiation. It's amazing. These guys are amazing. They understand differentiation. They know that Sarah might need a little extra attention where Bob doesn't. They understand that, but you have to be treating them consistently and fairly. That's when they will remember negatively something that you do, and that will affect your classroom management. Okay, next one. It's our responsibility. Basically, it's our responsibility to be in the control of the class. We're responsible for the safety of the kids, and they have to feel safe. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They have to feel safe, and we are the adult in the room. We need to be managing the class. Basically, there's no learning if it's super crazy. So how many of you were in a classroom where the classroom management was out of control? Teacher didn't really have any control. How was the learning in that classroom? Probably not as great as it could have been. So again, every time we're in charge of people, we need to have some kind of classroom management set up. Every time. If you are in charge of a meeting, you have to have some kind of classroom management. So where are people going to sit? How are people going to answer questions? How are papers going to be handed out? How are you going to take opinions? All those kind of things. Okay? And it reduces stress. If you have a pretty clear idea of what you want for your classroom management and how to get there, and then you actually do it, it reduces your stress. I'm going to just read you this quote. After 3 years, a third of new teachers leave the field, and after 5 years, almost half of new teachers leave the field. One of the main reasons, along with burnout over course prep and teaching subjects that they weren't trained to teach, is dealing with classroom management. According to Kaufman and Moss in their 2010 article entitled A New Look at Pre-Service Teachers' Conception of Classroom Management Organization, found that through a meta-analysis, the classroom discipline was cited by 85 out of 100 journals by young professionals as a concern. Okay, so you need to be thinking about your classroom management because it is a big part of teaching, and if it gets out of control, it's hard to rein back in. And we're going to be talking about that over the next few lectures. Okay, let's look at some of the fundamental needs of students. So basically, students need to belong, and they need to feel connected. They need to sense that teachers believe in them. They need to feel autonomous. They need to possess a sense of self-determination. They need to feel accountable for their actions. Kids want to be accountable for their actions. And they need to feel competent and successful. All of these fundamental, I'm going to grab my pencil just because it's fun, all of these fundamental student needs, cannot happen in a classroom where it is chaotic and children do not feel safe. This, however, doesn't mean that the class is just sitting in rows and they're quiet and there's no interaction. This can definitely happen in interactive, active classrooms, but at the core of it is a real sense of control in a positive way, and a real sense that these needs are being met. Okay, so I don't want you to equate out of control classroom, because there's some times when classrooms are not supporting these fundamental student needs that are very quiet and look very organized, but actually kids are really afraid to take any kind of academic or social risks. So don't equate it with quiet, organized classroom. You can have what's seemingly very chaotic classroom, but it's actually fulfilling these fundamental student needs, and the teacher actually has total control over academics and social interaction. Okay. This is for you to think about as we go through the rest of today. So I want you to think back to a negative classroom environment. What do you remember about the classroom? General atmosphere, teaching style, class rules, type of discipline, frequency of disruptive behavior, dealing with disruptive behavior. So somewhere where the teacher was not in control. And consider how you could ensure you do not create this negative classroom environment in your own style of teaching. Okay, so be ready to discuss this, as well as Positive learning environment. So link back to a classroom that you found particularly positive. What do you remember? Same kind of things, and then how could you incorporate these? So be ready to talk about those crazy chaotic classrooms where probably not a lot of learning happened and you might have actually not felt really safe in it, and positive learning environments. So what was it about what that teacher did and how that teacher set up the classroom that lent itself to be in a positive vein? So again, we're going to spend a fair bit of time talking about these two things. So jot some ideas down. Okay, here we go. Why do we need a classroom management plan? I alluded to this earlier, but this is America's Teachers on the Teaching Profession. 68% of elementary teachers, 64% of middle school teachers, and 53% of high school teachers say there's been an increase in level in behavior problems. Problem affects the whole classroom. Behavior problems distract other students from learning and require teachers to spend precious instruction time on discipline and behavior management. Absolutely, when you're spending more of your day disciplining than actually teaching, then that might be time to refresh what you are expecting in the classroom. 50% of teachers wish they could spend fewer school day minutes on discipline. One elementary educator defined the problem this way: the time it takes to referee fights and solve bullying issues takes away from academic instruction and keeps students from achieving as much as they could. And concern about low behavior issues was not limited to any particular demographic group. Low-income areas reported concerns about behavioral issues at a higher rate, 65%, but high-income areas were 56% of teachers reported more behavior issues. So again, these are not huge differences. So it's not a situation of a socioeconomic situation. It's a situation of teachers having a good classroom management plan and then actually implementing it in there. Okay, sorry, just gonna make sure I didn't miss anything and go on. So let's look a little bit at why do students actually, why do they misbehave? So these are a few ideas. There's probably more out there, but this will get us rolling down this idea of thinking about, from a psychology kind of point of view, why are they misbehaving? So basically, it's a reaction to society. It could be a reaction in society to home. We are seemingly in a violent, throwaway society where the focus is on the individual, and there seems to be a wide temperament among children. There's an allowance in our society for children to act the way that they do. So again, alluding back to that microsystem and mesosystem, if it's not supportive of the education system, then they may be just not aware of how to or why they should behave in a certain way at school. Okay. Secondly, to gain attention. Again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that belonging section, if they are not being fulfilled at home or in other areas of their lives, they will seek attention in any way. And if they can get it negatively, then they will seek it negatively. They will seek attention to get it, either positively or negatively. Okay, so what we want to do is swing that to them getting positive attention, so they don't have to act out and become behavior issues in class to get it negatively. Okay, they want to gain power or control in the class. Basically, if you're working with elementary students, they're in that Erikson psychosocial development stage. They're in stage 4, and they're working through that industry versus inferiority, where they're trying to figure out if what they are wanting to do is right within the context of the social setting, right? Also, you're going to have some powerful students in your classrooms, and just think about classrooms that you were in. Were there kids who could sway the whole feeling of the class or the whole attitude toward the teacher? Those are powerful students, and it's because of their personality that they just are power students. And so sometimes they will try to gain power in a classroom. So your job is to figure out who are those power kids in your classroom and bring them onto your side, or else you will have a power struggle. And if you're teaching especially Div 2, so grade 4 to 6 or middle school, junior high, you will lose. You will lose to the peer. So bring alongside that power person or that power student who could actually really cause havoc in your classroom. The next one, to exact retribution for personal slights. Philosophy of mine was always praise in public, criticize in private. If you take on a child in front of the class, you're probably both going to lose, because they will have been not intimidated. What's the word? They will have criticized. I'll use criticize again. It'll come to me. They've been criticized in front of the class, and that doesn't feel good, right? And so then they will continue to be that little thorn in your side for the rest of the semester or the rest of the year, because they are trying to get retribution for being criticized in front of the class. So praise in public, criticize in private. Pull that kid one-on-one where there's not an audience, where you can actually talk about the issue, and you are keeping the honor of the kid intact. Okay, and basically to conceal inadequacy. So misbehavior is sometimes a cover for feeling like a failure. Usually it's our low academic kids who act out, but again, think about how many positive academic experiences have they had. So that's back to our motivational theory, attribution theory, is these usually our lower kids have not had really positive experiences with academics, so then they don't want to look stupid, so they act out in order to get out of the situation. I actually was just talking with Brenda, who did the session on kids in care, and we were talking about fetal alcohol syndrome kids, and she said oftentimes those kids will do anything to get out of a situation where they look dumb. And so oftentimes that ends up being behavior issues. Okay, so sometimes we have low ability, low achieving kids, and we need to, again, give them appropriate support. These kids will try, but sometimes they'll fail, but at least in the trying, they will come on side with your idea of what should happen in the classroom. And again, sometimes we have students with failure syndrome, and those students, they don't put enough effort forward. They might begin some tasks but not finish. They quickly give up in face of a challenge, and then they will cover it up with bad behavior. So then again, they are trying to conceal their inadequacy. Okay, so let's look at our teacher's responsibility as well. If we're looking at student misbehaviors, how do we contribute to student misbehavior? Basically, we give them insufficient modeling by the teacher of actually how we want them to act in class. So if you want them to act a certain way in class, you actually practice it. We often think that kids just kind of will know how to line up properly without shoving the kid in front of them. But you need to practice those kinds of things, especially in Division 1. But you still need to continue practicing that. You also need to be practicing respect and proper communication and all of those things in your class. So we need to be excellent models in how to be in a classroom with people and how to uphold a positive classroom environment. We often have low expectations of students. We often say, yeah, well, they're 6, they can just run around and yell. It's like, no. If you set the bar here, the kids will rise to here. If you set the bar here, where do you think they're going to rise to? They're only going to rise to here. Push them, set the bar high. Don't have low expectations of your students, have super high expectations, and then follow through, and they will rise to it. Again, basically there's no guidance on how to behave in class. I kind of alluded to that, but again, sometimes we just assume they know and they don't. So you have to actually be really explicit, and we're going to talk about that with I don't know if it's 2 or 3, the second or third lecture on this, but we'll talk about rules in the classroom. Inconsistency and not seen as fair, and these are in italics because I think these are the key to classroom management. Inconsistency is the failure to follow through with stated expectations. So if you say, if you do this one more time, this will happen, and the child does that thing one more time, you better make sure that this happens. You have no chances. You have no chances. You must follow through every single time. So be careful what you actually say. So if you actually don't want to go through with the consequence, don't say it. I'm going to give you an example of one of my student teachers. She was teaching grade 1 and she was in the gym. And the students were crazy and they were not following her instructions at all. And she blew the whistle and they stopped, and she said, "Okay, grade 1s, if you do not follow what I've asked you to do, we are going to go back to the classroom." And this was like 10 minutes into their 30-minute phys ed period. And you know how much grade 1s love phys ed. So she blew the whistle. They were crazy again. She blew the whistle, and her partner teacher and I were like, "This is the test. This is the test." And she's like, "Line up, grade 1s. We're going back to the classroom." And her partner teacher and I were like, "Yes." I pulled her out of the class. She took the kids back to the classroom. The partner teacher took the class. I pulled her out into the hallway to chat, and she burst into tears, of course, because she was all wound up because the lesson hadn't gone the way she wanted, and I was there to observe and yada yada. But I said, "You did the best thing," because now the students know that you will follow through. And the rest of her practicum, classroom management, was, she still worked on it, but they had a basis of consistency and respect. So again, if you're not going to follow through, don't say it. If you say it, you must follow through. That's the inconsistency part. Also, it's when, how do teachers contribute to student misbehavior? If you are seen as not fair. This, I call it the kiss of death. If kids think that you are treating these 3 students differently than these 3 students as people, that's the issue. That's the issue. Again, they understand differentiation. They're okay with that. But if you play favorites, kiss of death. Yeah, I can't. Those are, if you take nothing else away from this lecture, those 2 things you have to constantly keep in your mind as a teacher, because they will derail your classroom management pretty much instantly in there. Not to freak you out, but just to give you some advice in there. Okay, let's look at indifferent. If you're just indifferent to your kids, like, yeah, I'm just teaching this stuff, and if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. They're going to catch that. So connect with your kids. These are great kids. Have some fun with them. And reciprocal determinism. This is a relationship with your students, and how that relationship is built one day affects how the next day goes. So respect is both earned and learned. Okay, so I want to give you an example from my first year of teaching. I was teaching a grade 8 social studies class, and they basically ran the class. I was just kind of there, but they basically had the reign. Because I was so frustrated with the classroom management of this class, I didn't engage with them, and I didn't really respect them. I just kind of wanted to get through. I'm sorry to say this, but that's kind of what happened there. And so I didn't have high standards for them, and then they reciprocated with some nasty behavior, because the relationship that I was building one day was not great, and so then that impacted all the rest of the days. So how you build that relationship and connect with the students definitely impacts the trajectory. So it either goes positively or negatively. Okay, so that's how do teachers contribute to student misbehavior. Let's look at what is at the root of positive classroom management. So hopefully as you scan this is not shocking to you that this would be the root of classroom management, because we are dealing with kids, we're dealing with students, we're dealing with people. So when we feel like the teacher actually supports all of these things that you're seeing on the slide, it will just naturally set up a positive classroom management situation. Okay, so let's have a go through these. So again, think about your scenario that you are creating, either the negative classroom management in your own life or the positive classroom management in your life. So basically, accept. We need to accept the students have to feel that they are actually contributing to the class. They need to feel like they belong, that they are making significant contribution. There's nothing less than going to class and then all the work that you've done that you want to contribute, you don't contribute because the teacher's like, you guys didn't do a good enough job. I'm not even going to ask you. That's your work is then not accepted. And each student needs to be valued as an individual, not as a class, but as an individual. We need to love our students. And this isn't a weird love. You need to love your students in a really deep and profound way, because if they feel loved and accepted in your class, they will do anything for you. They will comply with rules. And it's not that you're doing it to control them. You're doing it because this is why we're in teaching, right? Because we want to make that connection and we want to really deeply care about these students. Respect for them as individuals and as learners. And with this respect, I would say don't be their buddy, but be the adult. That grade 8 class that I was alluding to in my first year, I definitely kind of tried to be their buddy and they lost respect for me. But when I was the adult in the classroom, it was a much better relationship. Again, here we go. Be consistent. Be consistent from the first day of class, and we're going to talk about what you should do on the first day of class until the end of the year. Each student has to have the same consequence. The same consequence. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story about my own grade 12 experience as a student. I was a band kid, I was a band geek, and so I was really tight with my band teacher. But her philosophy on late assignments was she would mark them, but you would get a 0. So I handed in something late thinking, I'm her favorite. She'll mark mine. She won't care if it's late. She marked it 0. And I went outside. Of course, I was like, I can't believe she did this to me, blah, 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 blah. Inside, I was like, yes. She was totally consistent, even though it fleeted through her mind like, it's Colleen. She was probably super busy, blah, blah, blah. But she wasn't. She was consistent. And I remember that to this day. That was a long time ago, how consistent she was. Okay, so be consistent. Have a clear communication. Post your rules and consequences. Sometimes, again, we think they know what to do in the classroom, and they don't. Review the rules of the classroom every so often and explain why those rules are important. And again, we'll talk more about rules in subsequent lectures. Build authentic relationships. So build that one-to-one connection, right? Again, think about your favorite teacher. Probably your favorite teacher was probably an amazing content teacher, but you probably had some kind of personal relationship. Like my high school band teacher, I had a personal relationship with her. It was still very student teacher, but I knew that she liked me. And so that was super important. Okay. Get to know their names. If you are not a good name person, you just have to be a good name person, especially if you're going to teach junior and senior high school. You might have 120 students. You better be able to name them in the hallway when they're all milling around. You do whatever you need to do. Take all of their attendance lists now, have pictures. You sit and memorize names, because there's nothing worse than in like October when you're still going, yeah, guy in the yellow jacket in the back. You're not building authentic relationships in there. Again, praise in public, criticize in private. This is the way to build authentic relationships. Try to compliment each child at least once a day and actually keep a recording of it. Say, okay, I talked to this child and I paid that child a compliment because Often it's the kids that need the most support that never get compliments. So a way to again build that relationship is to compliment. It's not a insincere. If it's insincere, don't do it. But there's got to be something every day that a child does that is worthy of a compliment. Okay, avoid confrontation. Again, you don't want to make the student look bad in front of his or her peers, because you will be resented for it. Again, think back to a time in your own schooling when a student and a teacher were having it out in front of the class. What did everybody else do? They're probably like, right? It's really awkward, and it really impacts a positive classroom management or a positive classroom environment. It is rarely a win-win situation. It's usually a lose-lose situation when there's a confrontation in front of the class. Be proactive. Get to know your kids so you can react to bad moods. So if a child walks in and you're like, whoa, this child is really in a bad mood today, you know that much about him or her, and you can probably, give them a little bit of slack kind of thing there. Hold no grudges. Start each day with a clean slate. And that goes for you as well. If something went awry the day before, deal with it and move on. Oftentimes teachers beat themselves up. If you need to say you're sorry and move on, and don't keep coming back to it. Hold no grudges towards your students, and give yourself a little bit of a break as well. Don't hold a grudge against your own actions. And motivate, not control. So when we looked at motivational theory, if we try to actually control the kids, it's not going to work. We have to find a way to motivate them to want to do the work that we're wanting them to do, because that way they will actually commit. So if you try to make them behave, it's going to be rough. If you try to find ways to inspire and intrigue the student, then that will be a better road for you. Okay. So that's the root of positive classroom management. So just to finish off here, I want you, again, we're going to do this in Collaborate, is I want you to write out phrases that you would like to hear yourself say to a grade 4 class on a typical day to encourage a positive classroom environment. So just write out some things like, well, a compliment that you might say to a child, or what you might say to a whole class in order to support the creation of positive classroom management, and be ready to share in Collaborate. All right, awesome work. Take care, everybody.